Into thin air. Hey everyone, we are starting our Everest unit. I really just plead with you to read the book. I think it's actually pretty good and I think you'll like it. I want to make this video quick. I just want to go over a few basic things about Everest that you might already know, but maybe you don't, that kind of set up some of the background for what's actually happening in the book. I'll talk more about why we're reading this book in another video, like some of the theory and philosophy and ideas behind why I think it's useful in a writing course. But for now, just sit back and relax while we talk about just Everest, the mountain, which you can see I drew back here. No, you might be thinking that's a photograph of Everest, or some of you might be thinking I'm actually there. I'm not actually there. That's just a drawing, a really good drawing. But let's talk about it. I'm going to throw some pictures up here that I got from the interwebs to kind of help us talk about it. I hope you all know where Mount Everest is. It's on the border of Nepal and China. And there's actually two ways to summit Mount Everest. You can do it from the Nepal side or from the China side. Did I say Nepal and China? I think so. Most people, I don't want to say people, most expeditions climb from the Nepal side. It's more traveled. I don't know. I think it might be technically easier, but it's certainly more traveled, which makes it a more established route. And a lot of that has to do with it being cheaper there and things like that. The governments of China and Nepal charge prices to climb it. And you might think that's insane, charging money to climb a mountain. But we do the same thing in our country with national parks where we have to limit how many people can climb it. Like at Zion National Park, you have to get reservations and stuff like that. And at some of the busier national parks like Yosemite, you have to book it out like years in advance. And so it's for reasons like that. They don't want to have too many people on Everest. Also, for a country like Nepal, this is one of their main sources of income. As you read in the chapter, Everest was only climbed within the last 100 years, which is bizarre. When we think about human history, there's all this stuff that happened, and pretty late in human history, humans finally climbed Everest. And there's a couple reasons why it took so long for humans, us, not me, but us humans to climb it. One is because it's a remote mountain. Two is because we didn't really know if for sure it was the tallest mountain. And for a long time in human history, we're just trying to survive and not get killed in war. And people weren't thinking about summiting the highest mountain or visiting the North Pole or something like that. But around the 1900s or so, different empires like England and Russia, they were kind of competing to see who could accomplish certain things first, like first people to go to the North Pole, first people to go to Antarctica, first people to sail around the world. Well, that happened earlier, but trying to accomplish these historic firsts as a way to put a feather in the cap for their nation, for their empire. And that's why there was new interest in climbing Everest. And again, it was kind of a faraway place, but once it was discovered it was the tallest mountain, people decided it should be climbed. But the distance, like how far away it is from civilization, is only one problem. The real problem, even if Everest had been like next door to Hong Kong or something like that, it would still have taken a long time for human beings to be able to climb it. And there's a science reason for that. And that is a line called the death zone. It's an imaginary line, but above that imaginary line, weird things start to happen to your body. I'll throw an image up above this. About 8,000 meters above sea level, it's going to be around 27,000 meters, maybe 28,000 feet or so. That is where the oxygen pressure is 70% less than it is at sea level. The problem with this is your body is not taking in enough oxygen, which your body needs to live. And this is not something that you can just exercise a lot and get better at. It's different from lung capacity. A lot of people think that it's the same thing as lung capacity, like swimmers or divers who can hold their breath. It's not how much air you can take in, it's how much oxygen your blood can absorb. Now, you might be able to work out and get your lung capacity and your breathing really, really good. Only your genetics can tell you how much oxygen your red blood cells can absorb. No amount of working out or meditating or special training can make your blood carry more oxygen. That's just the genetic lottery, right? So people who are native to the Himalaya, it's a little ethnic group called the Sherpas. Sherpa is the name of an ethnic group. Someone who is a part of that group is called a Sherpa. In Western culture, sometimes we refer to a Sherpa as being a guide, but Sherpa is actually an ethnic group of people. Anyways, because they have lived up in Himalaya for generations upon generations, their blood has adapted to it. And that's why you're going to hear a lot about Sherpas climbing, because they have literally better blood for climbing than anyone else. And that isn't something that they trained for, that's something that they got because of genetics, right? So once you get above that death zone line, 8,000 meters, 28,000 feet, your body starts to die, literally die, because it's not getting enough oxygen. Our bodies, if you know what science is of bodies, our bodies take in oxygen, and that does things like repairs cells, converts nutrition into fuel for your body. It gives energies to your brain cells. All these things that humans do every day as a part of living, because there's not enough fuel in there, your body literally starts to shut down. And this affects your body in terms of endurance and in terms of how hard you can climb and for how long. But more dangerously than your body shutting down is your mind. Above 8,000 meters, your brain capacity lowers. And they've done countless experiments and tests on this, where they mount electrodes to people's brains and have them answer questionnaires at sea level and have them answer questionnaires at the top of Mount Everest. It's like basically you're drunk up there. So when you're at the top of Mount Everest, you've hiked all the way up there, right? And your body's dying and your brain is dying, and you are not thinking clearly. So this is why it took a long time for people to climb it, because it took a while for supplemental oxygen to be developed. And I'll show you some pictures of masks and things like that. There are plenty of people who've climbed it without oxygen, but by the time they climbed it without oxygen, the route is a lot more established, and these are more superhuman people who are able to do that. The vast majority of people who climb Mount Everest do it with the help of oxygen tanks and oxygen masks, because above 8,000 meters, your brain starts to die. And oxygen masks are just really uncomfortable things, as you all know from wearing masks all the time. By the way, Mount Everest is really, really tall. It is 35,000, give or take, feet above sea level. Mount Temp, I can see out my window, I think it's like 11,000 feet. The base of where you start hiking up for Mount Everest is 18,000 feet. So the base where you start climbing Mount Everest is a whole mountain taller than Temp. We don't have any mountains here that can even compare. Let me talk more about the death zone. We'll be reading in this book about acclimatization. That is your body getting used to having less oxygen. If I just took us all in a helicopter and put us at base camp right now, we would all pass out. Because at base camp, there's 75% of the oxygen available that is at sea level. At the death zone, it's like 25%. And that sudden difference is enough to make your brain go, oh crap, we should probably just turn off for a bit. So when people go to base camp, they don't just fly there, they hike in. And that is because it allows their body time to acclimatize. Then once they get to base camp, you don't just climb straight up Mount Everest. Instead, you'll be reading in the book about several acclimatization trips. And what they do essentially is go up a little bit and then back down. Up a little bit and back down. Up a little bit further and then back down. And they go back and forth to get their body used to less oxygen and then back down. And then they push it a little further and further. Now that doesn't change your blood's capacity to absorb oxygen, makes it possible for you to at least survive for a little bit. But if you stayed up there indefinitely above that death zone, you would just die. You just would. That's why passenger jets, they fly at 30,000 feet, 35,000 feet when you fly somewhere. By the way, that's as tall as Mount Everest. When you see a plane up there flying in the sky, that's how tall Mount Everest is. And all those planes that we fly up there are pressurized with air, because if you didn't have air up there, we'd all die. That is why it's taken so long for people to climb Everest, is because it's so far away and because the lack of oxygen is going to kill you. I can't emphasize enough that this is a blood thing. It's not a lung thing. So after Mount Everest was successfully climbed, different countries started trying to climb it. And you'll start to see in the book, there's kind of two different kinds of groups that climbed Everest. One group was the military type. In Russia, mountaineering, climbing mountains, that was a military thing because it brought glory to Mother Russia. So a whole bunch of soldiers literally climbed Everest, and they did it like it was a military assault. Then there's other mountaineers who are more explorers. And you're going to see some tension in this book between kind of the military mindset and kind of a more loose, exploratory mindset. And I don't think either one's right or wrong, but it's interesting to see how they conflict. Finally, around, I don't know, when TV was invented and a little bit after that, people realized that they could make money taking people up Everest. And I don't mean just taking a helicopter up there and putting them there, but people who are rich, one, and also physically capable of climbing, but who couldn't do it on their own, right? Well, maybe they could, but it's so much easier with a guide. They would pay people $100,000 more for the opportunity to climb Everest. And that's what's happening nowadays, is when you go to Everest, it's not just some guy showing up with a bunch of like power bars climbing Everest. It's a whole expedition that the vast majority of them are commercial, meaning people pay to go on it. And as a result, Everest is getting really crowded. I'm going to show you some pictures of how crowded it is. And that's another problem you're going to read about in this book, is how crowded it is up there. And when you start to put a ton of people up there who need oxygen, you can see that only a few things have to go wrong in order to just cause a whole disaster. And that's what this book is about. And by the way, the guy who wrote this book, in case you weren't aware, his name is John Krakauer. He's one of my favorite writers. He was a member of the expedition that climbed it, and you'll be reading that. This is his account of what happened up there. This happened in 1996, and it was the deadliest disaster in Everest history. And there's a lot of different accounts for what went wrong. Now, a lot of things went wrong, but there's different accounts for who shares blame, what decisions were made by whom that led to this disaster. And it's that debate that we're going to sink our teeth into. Okay, I am done talking.